What's up, everybody? Welcome to Lighting the Void Radio. Happy autumn equinox. My dumbass said vernal equinox in the Discord. It's not the vernal equinox, it's the autumn equinox. And I know everyone's wondering, where the hell is Mary? Well, Mary will be here tomorrow night, for sure. We're going to be doing that show tomorrow night. It's going to be a good show. But take a wild guess why Mary Ducina wouldn't be here on the autumn equinox. Don't you think she's a little busy? Which we all should be, you know. Make sure you do your ceremonies and your Thanksgivings and all that stuff, whatever you do. And even if you don't celebrate it, he'll go outside the moon, whatever. Thank whatever gods you want to thank for the fall, because it's a beautiful time. We're going to get weirder. We've already set the record straight. There's a little glitch there. Did y'all see that? We've already set the record straight with the first book. Things get a little weirder in the second book. We're going to have more discussions. Things are going to get more strange. And I always looked at it like this. The reason why we talk, I was just talking to Bryce, who's here with us as always. And Wolf, you're welcome to join. Any of you guys are welcome to join the Chill and Talk and Discord to be a part of the show if you want to voice in. Although I might mute you down during certain parts of the readings, but don't take offense to it. But anyways, I look at it this way. Like, so we've talked a lot about the occult and ceremonial magic and things like that. Well, keep in mind that whole thing is praxis. It's the idea of tapping into this realm of the collective, the unconscious, this place that manifests things in some kind of circumambulative way in our life, which we know how to make it work. What Robert Monroe's doing is literally traveling into the void, so to speak, behind the scenes to see how the architecture works, how all this stuff works. And most really good astral travelers like William Buellman, Robert Monroe, Robert Bruce, can name a few, to have a really hard time at it's not a hard time, but more like it's not easy to describe this place. So what I'm trying to say is as we get deeper into the Robert Monroe journey, things are going to get a lot more it's going to feel like it's sci-fi, but it's not. This stuff really happened to him. And it gets strange. Answers will be revealed, right? You remember all the answers. We have to review real quick. What are all the questions he had in the first book? He had all the different fights that he had with entities and stuff. The big questions about gods and angels and demons and all of that stuff that he felt like that he had to emotionally let go, the whole idea of the story that he'd been told his entire life. And then he asked this question before the close of the first book, which was, are we some part of some kind of big experiment that's just going on, like we're some human cattle or something, right? There are people going around saying that's what this whole thing is. I've seen the YouTube videos. They're saying that this whole thing is we're just some big experiment, like cattle or whatever. But I don't think that a lot of those people actually traveled. Just my personal opinion. It's only an opinion. I don't think they traveled as deep into the void as Robert Monroe did. I don't think they did. I think here's what Wolf was saying yesterday, and I totally believe this too. Whatever you believe deep down into your core, like we run our mouths just like I'm running my mouth right now. We think about stuff. We just run our mouths constantly, and we think we're in control of stuff. We think we know all this stuff. We think we got it all figured out. But that is just the consciousness. What the real you and the real power is the unconscious. That's what's running the show. Not the stuff that's just coming out of your mouth off the top of your head, like this radio show. That's not what's running the show. What's running the show is the unconscious. And in order for us to, I guess, get magical or get into that whole woo place of manifestation or whatever, we have to learn how to speak to it. Not just by like doing vision boards and all this other stuff, but actively learn how to speak to it. Try to see how it works. With that being said, we always have to think that when Robert Monroe or any of us take a journey out of body, when we go somewhere, we're probably going to see something that I don't know, that we're not supposed to see or see behind the scenes, so to speak, but we're also taking in stuff that's in that place, not only inside of us, but this whole like collective place. So this is why I'm telling you it gets weird. To try to decipher what's real, what is he really seeing, what's the truth, and what is his consciousness or his unconscious projecting while he's traveling through these places, trying to figure this stuff out. And I know that sounds complicated, but if you think about what I just said, that's exactly what the hell you're doing in your life. That's why it's important. Because you have to ask yourself, before you go down this road, and if you haven't, you should ask yourself, how important is the truth to you? That seems like a simple question, but if you just really just ask yourself, how important is the truth to you? Because from my experience, it's not as important as we say it is. Like most of us, I think it's just human nature. I don't think it's anything bad, but we get to a place where when we stop thinking because it becomes really uncomfortable. It's scary even. And we're like, yeah, the truth is important, but I'd rather just find something to believe in. Right? And it makes things easier for us. And that's kind of, how we go about things. But if you just bear with this journey together, through this Monroe journey, it's gonna reveal to you, at least through his experience, here's the good news, that it's not bad. It's not like a human cattle thing. It's gonna seem that way at first, but it's not. Bryce, you got anything before we start this? This one's actually shorter than the other one. It's not as long as the other one.
I don't have anything to say just yet.
You've preloaded this, though. You've started on this already. You're like on chapter 5, you said?
Yeah. I listened to that on the little road trip I took for work today.
Cool. Yeah. So we'll get into the prologue, and don't forget the Mary show's tomorrow night. For those of you that came out hoping to see just Mary, she'll be here tomorrow night. God bless her. All right. So there seems to be an easy way to do and a hard way to do things. And given the choice, all of us take the easy route simply because it's more efficient. It saves time and it saves energy. But if it's too easy, some of us start to feel guilty. And with the uncomfortable sense that we're missing something if we don't go the laborious, tried and true pattern. The old arbitrary rules. You got to work real hard to be successful, If you think about that, that's not necessarily true either. So if that's easy, it must not be good. It might be even sinful. But after a while, the easy way becomes the ordinary way, and we forget the old road. When you lived in an area long enough to have traveled between two cities before the interstates and freeways were built, try the old familiar highways once, and you'll find once is enough. The start and stop congestion, the total disorder, the growing frustrations far overshadow any remaining nostalgia you may have harbored. You have enough of such local traffic at the beginning and end of each run on the interstate. These are all metaphors if you ain't picking that up yet. So now here's the problem. Suppose you met someone who had never driven on an interstate. All his life, he's driven only in local traffic. He's heard about such superhighways before, but he might have even seen one from a distance or heard the rumble of vehicles or smelled their exhaust fumes. And he rationalizes any number of reasons why he hasn't and won't go the interstate. He doesn't need to. He's satisfied the way he is. They travel too fast, he says, so it's not safe to go on the interstate, or you have to go out of your way to get on it. It's full of strangers from all over the world, so you don't know whom you'll meet. Can't trust them. Your car isn't in very good condition. Maybe it might break down and leave you stranded without anybody to help. Or in some lonely spot on the side of the interstate you've never heard. Maybe sometime you'll try to go on the interstate, but not right now. Now, suppose you happen to see a construction order from the state highway department to begin demolition of the old highway so that all local traffic will have to go to the interstate eventually, like it or not. What do? What would you do? Nothing. Suppose maybe the guy that doesn't want to go on the interstate is an old and dear friend. Then what? Your friend knows order but refuses to believe it. He can see the work crews beginning to destroy or beginning to form the end of the old highway, and then he ignores their existence. But you know the intense trauma he's about to undergo when the old road is gone, when it's shut off, and he'll be carried kicking and screaming onto the interstate. Still, remember, these are just metaphors. You decide to do something, anything you can. And after your decision, weeks, months, years pass due to your own inertia. You have your own rationale. You don't know how to proceed. You don't know how to describe the interstate in local traffic terms. And your friend understands only local traffic. Now someone else will come along and do it for you, for your friend. Finally, you discover this stupidly simple answer. You and your friend suffer from the same affection, but from different causes. It is inertia. Back in the old railroad days, a locomotive could pull only 4 or 5 cars at a time, because if more cars than that were added, it would simply spin its drive wheels trying to get started. Inertia. You guys know what inertia means? Once something starts moving, it keeps moving and kind of builds momentum, but just keeps going. So then a smart young thinker came along and invented the sliding coupler, which let the locomotive pick up the slack and inertia 1 car at a time. Ask any freight conductor what it was like to be in the caboose on the tail end of a 100-car train when he highballs the engineer. Instantaneous 0 to 30 miles an hour. And it's the same with automobiles. The transmission is there to provide big torque and a low gear to overcome the inertia of not moving. So once underway, at cruising speed, power is required only to overcome wind resistance and road friction, like when you're in the higher gears, right? On an aircraft carrier, which does the job in a hurry and not too gently, I think you guys get what he's saying right here, right? So the transmission's there to provide big torque and low gear and overcome inertia. Once at cruising speed, power is required only to overcome wind resistance and road friction, and very little of it relatively. So the hard case is the catapult launch on an aircraft carrier, which does the job in a hurry and not too gently. Guns are inertia overcoming devices for bullets. It's doubtful that explosive or catapult methods to full speed interstate in a different form will be less than confusing and bewildering, even with modification to local traffic standards. Now take all of what he just said as an illustration. And I would also say this too. The anxiety people have when something that they're used to is about to be destroyed or go away, and then trying to explain to someone how the new road works or the new methods work and the new thing. People don't like that. Most people don't like that. So all of this is just an illustration. It's just a big metaphor. I can't get the stuff under a null point. There ought to be a better way to do this. Your uncontrolled emotion of anger is using much of your energy, a very human response. A better way to do it, stuff can't help being what it is, and you kick a stone in your path and it hurts your toe. Why get angry at the stone? You can't be angry at it for being on the path or being harder than a toe. Yes, now let's see if it works. It is focus of attention, of consciousness, which is without diversion or deviation. No other energy available to you as a human is powerful. That's a pretty good statement. It is focus of attention, of consciousness, which is without diversion or deviation. There is no other energy available to you as a human that's that powerful. As a lens will direct energy you call light, so you can use consciousness. And each time I hear something like that, I realize how far I have to go. You're doing very well, Mr. Monroe. Your own recognition of such percept is an indication. This is like the voice in his head talking right here. Hey, I got it. It's under the baseline, except for this one sawtooth. Can't seem to hold on to it. And there's a smaller waveform on the sawtooth. Can't get it put away. It's another form of rote, as you call it. Take it if you so desire. It may be interesting to you. Sure, why not? Click. Going from local traffic to interstate does indeed require an entry or acceleration lane to merge into the flow. If you can make the tools supplied by local traffic apply in the design and building of the ramp, so much the better. You need to remember especially the inertia factor. Pick up the slack on one loaded car at a time. Start in low gear so you don't stall the engine. Then shift smoothly. Automatic transmissions don't know when you need to shift. If the design is correct, your friend is cruising along the interstate long before the old highway is closed down. You do the best you can. And that was the prologue. That's just a big metaphor for what's coming. Robert A. Monroe, Faber, Virginia, 1985. I want to say something to that too. Like, so when I first started trying to get out of body myself, I was having troubles. I would get to the vibratory state and then I couldn't get out, or I'd get to the vibratory state and I would get out, but I would just sit up and nothing would happen. And eventually I got to this place where I realized that maybe I'm sitting up too fast, or maybe my emotions are jumping ahead of me, or maybe I'm getting overzealous or whatever. But finally, the one time it happened, I remember when I sat up on the couch, that word inertia kind of rings out to me, because I let the vibrations kind of peak, and then the vibrations kind of, trailed off a little bit. And as I sat up on the couch, I remember telling myself, just don't stop. Don't push too hard, but don't stop. You know how when you're like in a couch, it's kind of, I guess, especially soft couches, you get stuck or you got to shift. Well, I just told myself just to keep the energy moving. And it did. It actually, it felt like a perfect segue. Even though when I stood up, I still felt like nothing happened. But the movement from laying down to off the couch felt smooth. Like there was no stopping, no weird glitches, just the perfect kind of inertia. And that was my first full-fledged etheric out-of-body experience. All right, so who else here? And I say hi to everybody. What's up, Dragon Rose, Robo 1776? Monroe was out there exploring the unknown territory, making known the truth like Columbus exploring new land. Yeah, definitely. I'd say so. All right. So if there is a first and obvious point to be made, I can report that I'm still alive physically after 25 years of exploring personally the out-of-body experience. A little time-worn, but still more or less operational. There were several moments when I was not so sure. However, some of the best medical authorities have assured me that the physical problems I have encountered have been simple cause and effect of living in the culture or civilization of the mid-20th century America. Some take another position, that I'm still alive as a result of such out-of-body activity, but take your pick. So it would seem that one can practice going out of the body regularly and survive. Also, after having been tested periodically by experts, I can still make the statement that I am reasonably sane and not so reasonably sane world. There are many people who do strange things and get away with it. A century ago, it might have been going over Niagara Falls in a barrel. What is the out-of-body experience? For those who have not encountered the subject as yet, an out-of-body experience, or an OOBE, is a condition where you find yourself outside of your physical body, fully conscious and able to perceive and act as if you were functioning physically, with several exceptions. You can move through space and time, slowly or apparently somewhere beyond the speed of light. You can observe, participate in events, make willful decisions based upon what you perceive and do. You can move through physical matter such as walls, steel plates, concrete, earth, oceans, air, even atomic radiation without effort or effect. You can go into an adjoining room without bothering to open the door. You can visit a friend 3,000 miles away. Isn't this the coolest shit? How is this not the coolest thing being talked about right now? It should be top of everything. The Rogan podcast, everything. You can explore the moon, the solar system, the galaxy, if it interests you, or you can either enter another reality system, only dimly perceived and theorized by our time-space consciousness. It's not a new phenomenon. Recent surveys indicate some 25% of our population remembers having at least one such experience. Man's history is full of reports of such events in earlier literature, and it was commonly labeled astral projection. But I began refusing to use this term as it had an occult connotation and was certainly non-scientific by our standards. Charles Hart, a psychologist friend, popularized the term out-of-body experience when we were working together in the 60s. In the past 20 years, it has become the accepted Western generic term for this particular state of being. And without any obvious reason, I began to go out of my body in the fall of 1958. In the light of later historical events, it is important to state that no drugs or alcohol were involved. I was a non-user of the former and an infrequent imbiber of the latter. Several years ago, I attended a conference not too far from our former home in Westchester County, New York, the site of my first out-of-body experience. And as we drove by the house, I commented that the reason why they began was still obscure. A psychologist friend riding with me took one look at the house, turned and smiled, and he said, "The answer's easy. It's the house. Take a good look at it." I stopped the car, and the house looked the same. Green roof and stone. The new owner had maintained it nicely. I turned to my friend and said, "I don't see anything different." "The roof," he pointed a finger upward. "It's a perfect pyramid. Moreover, it's covered with copper, just like the tops of the big ones in Egypt before the looters took over." I stared dumbfounded. "Pyramid power, Robert," he went on. "You read about it. You were living in a pyramid. That did it." Pyramid power. Well, maybe. There are reports and books that make claims about strange energies therein. That the out-of-body experience frightened me then is a quantum understatement. When it recurred, I was filled with panic-driven visions of brain tumors and oncoming insanity. This led to extensive physical examinations, all negative, followed by recommendations of psychotherapy for minor hallucinatory dysfunction. I discarded this diagnosis automatically. Some of my best friends at the time were psychiatrists and psychologists with their own problems, albeit certainly more orthodox. Instead, I stubbornly began a search and research into the phenomenon out of self-preservation, and as the fear and panic subsided, out of growing curiosity, the trail took me beyond conventional scientific circles. Total rejection in those circles, by the way. Religions, it's a work of the devil, they would say. A parapsychology, interesting, but sorry, no data available, they would say. And Eastern disciplines, they would say, come study our ashram in northern India for 10 years. This was chronicled in my previous book, Journeys Out of the Body. One thing is certain, the purpose of the previous book was many times fulfilled. It brought thousands of letters from all parts of the world, and among them many hundreds of people wrote their personal thanks for a reassurance that they were not mentally deranged. They were not so much alone after all with their closet secret experience that they could not explain, and most important, that they were not necessarily candidates for the psychiatric couch or mental hospital. That was the stated purpose of the original book, to help just one person avoid such needless incarceration. Man, I wonder, I've probably haven't asked this question enough, man, but I wonder how many people have actually been, what's up, Dan? How many people got locked up for having out-of-body experiences? Bryce, you think that people actually, I bet you there were several people that said, hey, you know, like if they even mentioned that they were getting out of body, probably got sent to a psych ward.
I mean, it's
back in the day for sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, people were locked up for all kinds of stuff. Things that today are like, there's something physiologically wrong with their body that can be fixed, and they locked them up because they didn't know any better. So yeah, I'm sure they did.
Yeah, like I mean, it's kind of weird talking about the out of body experience now, you know, in some extent, like. But I can imagine doing it like back in maybe, I don't know, the 1800s or before the Renaissance period, unless you're like in a spiritual circle or something, you know.
In the Renaissance period, they just burn you at the stake, I'm pretty sure. Like, I went out of body and visited something, and they would...
That's a good, all right, so that's another thing I want to do a show on too. Like, if anybody knows, and please don't make it up, make sure it's true, okay? But if anybody knows anybody that's been locked up, like in a psych ward, for having out-of-body experiences, hit me up, because I'd love to talk to him on the show. I'm not talking about hallucinations or real, you know, like someone just had just a regular out-of-body experience. Maybe they just talked about it to the wrong person and got locked up. Because I bet you that still happens today. For sure. Let's see. He goes on to say, I'm personally am bemused, which is the opposite of amused, at the changes in these 25 years. In most academic and intellectual societies, it is now quite acceptable to talk about out-of-body experiences. However, I'm sure the great majority of people in our culture are still unaware of this fact or facet of our lives or their lives. So in 1959 or 1960, I certainly would have derided the idea that I might give a talk on out-of-body experiences at a Smithsonian institution, or papers on the subject would be presented before the American Psychiatric Association, but they happened. Yeah, did you ever think that the government would come give you a visit, the military? Because that happened too. One of the most frequent approaches I hear reminds me very much of the old and worn-out show business routine about the question a producer usually puts to the job seeker performer. He's listening to what he knows already. The actor appeared a great one in 1922, starred in Who Goes There, and in 1938 won the Critics Award for his lead in Nose to Nose, and in 1949 played the role of Willie in What Makes Willie Weep. The producer interrupts and puts the very simple question, "That's great, but what have you done yesterday?" And so it is. What I have been doing out of body since the publication of Journeys, or what have I been doing since the publication of Journeys Out of the Body? Remember, he wrote this in the, I believe, Journeys Out of the Body in the 60s, and this came out in the, I think the 80s, I think. I have to check, someone check me on that. But the answer I usually give is this. Beginning in the 70s, I began to experience a frustration, a limitation in my out-of-body activities. It's hard for some people to believe, I suppose, but travels actually became boring. That is hard to believe. The early excitement had long passed, and it became an effort to participate in controlled tests, and because it was an effort, I began to sense that the particular theme of proof was not part of my mode of operation. Moreover, when free of such testing limitations, there didn't seem to be anything exciting to do. My deliberate inducement of the second state also became tedious because I had found a simpler way to achieve it. I would wake up after 2 or possibly 3 sleep cycles, or approximately after 3 or 4 hours, and find myself already relaxed, physically rested, and completely wide awake. In that state, I found it ridiculously easy to unhook, and he has unhook in quotation marks, and flow freely out of the body. This, of course, posed the question of what to do. Everyone else was asleep at 3 or 4:30 in the morning. There seemed nothing to be gained by going and meeting people while they were asleep, and not any easy prospect for validation because of the hour, so with no particular goal or attraction, I usually would just drift around a bit, then slip back in, turn on the light, and read until I was sleepy again, and that was it. This compounded the frustration, as there was still the compulsion. All of the effort to work in the out-of-body state had to have some meaning or importance beyond what my conscious mind or those of others thought to be important. I don't know, man. I can't imagine getting bored. Even if everybody's asleep, like I would have to have several out-of-body experiences. Like, dude, you're getting to go around and be a ghost, man. Like, you're getting to go around and be a ghost, even if everybody's asleep. I can't see myself getting bored too fast doing that. I was freaking stoked when it started working for me. But I guess like anything else, you'd get bored, you know. I guess. In the spring of 1972, a decision was made that provided the answer. The limiting factor was my conscious mind. See? Told you. Therefore, if out-of-body experience decisions were left up to that part of me, as they had been, I would remain just as I was. I was too much in control. This left brain I. What would happen if I turned this decision-making? I want everybody to ask this question right here in their life. Not just out-of-body experiences, but in their life. What would happen if I just turned this decision-making process over to my total self, or soul, in question mark, who was purportedly conversant with such activities? In other words, what would happen if I just, it's not like you're apathetic, but it's like you just let your soul kind of guide whatever happens, and you listen, you know. Okay. Believing this, I then put it into practice. The following night, I went to sleep, went through 2 sleep cycles, and about 3 hours woke up and remembered the decision. I detached from the physical and floated free. I said in my conscious mind that the decision to do is to be made by my entire self, not the just controlling side. And after waiting for what seemed only a few seconds, there was a tremendous surge, a movement, an energy in the familiar spatial blackness, and there began for me an entire new era in my out-of-body activities. Since that night, my non-physical experiences have been almost totally due to this procedure. The results have been of a nature so far removed from anything my conscious mind could conceive of that a new problem arose. Although my physical here-now consciousness is always a participant, better than 90% of such events seem to me impossible to translate into the time-space medium. And here again is why this book is going to be hard. It shouldn't be hard. We're going to figure this out. How am I going to speak to you about his experiences where it makes sense to your mind? It is as if one were trying to describe music, such as a symphony orchestra with choir, and do it in words without the use of such technical descriptions as notation, instruments, intervals, tonalities, and so on. One can use such words as nice, or compelling, or frightening, or awe-inspiring, warm, loving, beautiful, and be nowhere remotely near the actual description. You do the best you can. People say the same thing about DMT experiences too, though, which I suppose is what will happen as this attempt is made. I'm sure reporting Niagara Falls barrel cruising was easier. My here and now activities posed another problem. None of the exercises and techniques I had been designing and providing for others would work for me. Psychologist friends have offered many reasons why they are ineffective in my case, and the simple one is that I just cannot get my left brain out of the way. Monroe's a bit of a control freak. I've been so deeply involved in the production process that my critical and analytical faculties simply won't let go of the here-now attention-focusing material contained therein. Also, in order to produce these exercises in an audio mode, I've had to listen with an intense form of concentration in the recording and mixing of the various sounds that we use. Evidently, I've had to shut off the effect. A simple one frequency tone causes me to analyze the frequency and attempt to determine that it's stable. Perhaps there is an effect I am not aware of, but it is a strange place to be. Looking over the fence at a garden you have planted and fertilized, watching everybody else have such a good time. Yeah, that's got to suck. You know, like he's teaching everybody how to get out of body. They're getting out of body and having an awesome time, and he can't do it anymore the way he used to. The here-now portions of recent events are relatively straightforward. For example, I had become painfully, literally, aware that my body has taken to rejecting chemicals. This includes alcohol, prescription drugs, caffeine, and evidently anything else my body says is unnatural for its operation. The rejection or allergic reaction takes the form of profuse sweating, vomiting, and their severe abdominal cramps. This may be constructive, but it also has its disadvantages. I never was a consequential drinker, but even a glass of wine begins the rejection process. During surgery, it is something intense to cope with. I begin to reject the anesthesia and awake on the operating table to feel the surgeon sewing me up. Oh, shit. Has anybody ever woke up during surgery? Has that happened to you, Bryce? Have you ever woke up during surgery? All right.
I couldn't imagine.
Dude, that's a freaky thing. I don't even want to think about that. I'm sure to the surprise of the anesthesia. Yeah, well, I've heard stories too, like people wake up during surgery and start seeing, feeling everything. In recovery under intense pain, a shot of Demerol only brings on extreme vomiting. And you can imagine my frustration when others are using a system we developed that permits excellent non-drug pain control in the post-surgical period. In my hospital visits during the past 10 years, only once has the system worked for me. I was sorely disappointed when it was not effective on the last trip. It was a nearly unbearable event. Yet I knew if I consciously went out of body, I would not have the courage to return to that sea of scalding pain. A psychologist friend back in the early days was skeptical of this drug allergy, and further, he was interested in what the effects of what are now called entertainment drugs would be on my type of personal and physical makeup. We tried, quote, laboratory quality mescaline and LSD on my system, and nothing happened. Come on, man. So Monroe saying that he tried laboratory, in other words, high quality mescaline and LSD on his system and nothing happened. I don't know. Another item, I asked a non-physical friend if I had been in a physical life existence in the recent past. It was one of the few clear verbal answers that I received. Your last human life was spent as a monk in a monastery in Coshocton, Pennsylvania. I looked at the map of Pennsylvania and there was no Coshocton indicated. I knew there was a Coshocton, Ohio, because I had lived in the state. So therefore I asked again to be sure that the state was right, and it was Pennsylvania. I didn't give it much thought because I personally am not deeply interested in who I was or if I was. I mentioned the event to a Catholic Monsignor friend, and he offered to look it up in his records. Some weeks later, he called to say there really was a monastery in a place called Coshocton, Pennsylvania. He thought it would be interesting to drive up there some weekend and see if I responded to any memories, and perhaps someday. Item. The money pants pocket. For years, I have kept this as a close secret because no one believes it. I have shown it to my wife, Nancy, and she is still skeptical. It seems that if I leave a certain pair of pants hung in the bedroom closet, it generates paper money. Real money, not new and crisp, usually fairly well worn. It is never a great amount, and the maximum I have ever found in the pocket is $11. Usually there will be only $2, $3, or $4. Time does not seem to be a factor. I can ignore it for a week, and there will be perhaps $3. I may not go near it for 3 months, and there may be only $6. But there seems to be no particular format for the generation or the amount of money. I can take the pants to the cleaners and return them to the closet in their plastic bag. It makes no difference. We have theorized that I may walk in my sleep and insert money into my pants pocket. The unopened plastic bag dispelled that theory. One rationale is that, in an ongoing result of a very urgent need for a few dollars back in my teenage period, there was a strange event back in the era that might relate to it, but some part of my system still remembers that urgent need and attempts to provide for it. Too bad when you reach another stage in life, $5 or $6 or even $11 doesn't go very far. Man, you can't even buy... That's freaking weird, by the way. Like, he just keeps finding money that shows up in this pants pocket in his closet or whatever. But $11, you can't even buy a Big Mac meal with $11 now. It's like 13 something. Very few people really believe it, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't if it didn't happen to me. Here's another item. In our house at Whistlefield Farm, there was a screened porch off the living room. To get to the porch, one had to go through two double doors and down a series of flagstone steps that led to the porch at a lower level. These steps were quite steep, and the difference in floor height being approximately 4 feet. One morning, with my arms full of books and papers, I walked out the entrance to the porch and stumbled. My left crossed over in front of my right, and I dove headlong in the direction of the flagstone floor on the porch. As I fell, I wasn't able to get my arms in front of me. I remember thinking, well, this will certainly end up with a fractured skull and a broken neck. About 6 inches from the floor, my fall was suddenly arrested, and I landed on my head and shoulders very lightly on the flagstone floor. No heavier than if I had simply put my head down very carefully. The rest of my body then draped down afterwards, drifting as gently as a feather. I lay there for a moment wondering what the hell happened. I felt my head and my shoulders, and there was no pain, no mark, no bruise, nothing. I stood up, picked up my books and papers, looked at the place from where I had fallen, and tried to figure out some answer. Something cushioned my fall, but I certainly was not consciously aware of what it was. Some months later, in the middle of winter, a similar event took place. I was walking down the front steps, which had been reportedly cleaned after a snow, slipped and started to fall. But this time, I was not quite so surprised when I again landed very lightly. There have been only 2 such events, and I don't think I will deliberately try to fall experimentally. Just another one of those as yet unexplained moments. Here's another item. Yeah, I can't think of anything in my head how that would happen unless he studied jiu-jitsu or judo and was just doing break falls. Even if he did break falls, he wouldn't land like a feather. He would still land all at once. That's funny. That's weird. Or here's another item. One of the more puzzling events took place as a result of a very direct communication, or so it seemed. Early one morning in the mid-70s, about 3 o'clock to be exact, I went through my customary lazy man's way of rolling out of my body. That's my favorite way to do it. Almost immediately, I was accosted by a vaguely formed individual who gave me this very specific instruction. Okay. He gave me this very specific instruction. Mr. Monroe, be at Eagle Hill at 7 a.m. on July 4th. Surprised, I asked for a repeat of the instruction, and it came exactly the same. Mr. Monroe, be at Eagle Hill at 7 a.m. on July 4th. Before I had a chance to ask why or what it was all about, the form faded and disappeared. I then rolled back into my body and sat up and wrote it down very carefully. The next night, when I performed the same act, almost immediately the form was there again and the same message. It was very definite, almost a command. And again the figure faded before I had a chance to query further. I tried the third night to see if it replicated again, but there was no response. What was so impressive about it was that the instruction was very clear, and it was repeated exactly the same the second night. Most important, quote, they actually called me by my name. This instruction elicited a great deal of curiosity from me and those of my friends and family to whom I related it. We speculated in many ways about it, but the big question was, where is Eagle Hill? It was about April when the instruction was given, and there seemed to be plenty of time to find out what the message meant. But try as we might, we could not find any place called Eagle Hill. And after a few weeks, I more or less forgot about the idea. See what I'm talking about? Just a whole bunch of random, just weird stuff that can't be explained just is starting to happen to this dude after he keeps having all these OBs. An event changed all that. While visiting friends several hundred miles from home, we were having dinner out on the patio of their house, and my host had a radio receiver that automatically scanned various frequencies, such as police, fire, and so on. We were sitting there chatting when suddenly over the radio came someone saying, Eagle Hill. And it jarred my attention immediately. I excitedly asked my host what the radio was tuned to. He replied that it was the FAA aircraft channel for instructions to and from aircraft. I waited eagerly for something more on the radio, but my host asked curiously what was so important. Needless to say, I didn't feel that I could tell him. A couple of minutes later, the radio came to life loudly and clearly. This is United 351 over Eagle Hill at 12,000 feet. Over. The next day, after a long drive home, I went to the FAA facility at our local airport and asked the FAA man where Eagle Hill was. He replied instantly that it was a holding point in the neighboring state, a radio marker beacon. He showed it to me on the airways sectional map, and sure enough, there it was, Eagle Hill. There evidently was some type of small village by that name, although it did not show on any of the road maps we had. This put a whole new prospect on the message. Therefore, on the afternoon of July 3rd, I left home for the long drive over to Eagle Hill. I drove into the small town nearest to the supposed site, checked into a local motel, had a casual dinner, and went to bed early. At exactly 7 the next morning, I drove into the crossroads called Eagle Hill. It consisted of 2 or 3 houses, a garage, and a store, all situated around a small country crossroads. Not a very impressive place, to say the least. It looked like it had not changed in the last 30 or 40 years. I pulled over to the side and stopped the car. Several local citizens sitting outside the garage looked at me curiously as I sat and waited. I waited for over an hour and nothing happened. No one approached me. I didn't feel anything except first excitement and then disappointment. Finally, something after 8 o'clock, under curious stares, I started the car and drove up through Eagle Hill and into the countryside beyond. I drove about 2 miles further, and there was nothing but farms. I returned to the crossroads and turned west and drove several miles. Again, nothing different. No one signaled me, nothing except country and farms. I turned around and drove east. It was all the same. It sounds like a freaking Twilight Zone. I returned to my post at the crossroads, sat in the car, and just waited. When it got to be 12 o'clock, I decided that it had all been an illusion. Returned to the motel, checked out, and had lunch. It was either the wrong Eagle Hill, or I understood it wrong, misinterpreted, or it was all a hoax or a dream. After much contemplation, I finally decided where my mistake was. The invitation or request was not that I go to Eagle Hill physically. It was that I be there in an out-of-body state. What the invitation did not take into account was how difficult it was for me to go directly to a specific place rather than just a person. Adding fuel to the fire, years later and encountering a government official. Ooh, here we go. And government officials, okay. And encountering a government official, I asked him about the particular site and without reference to why I was interested. He related to me that it was a special federal research installation. It was being constructed just about the time I was there. Evidently, it is still not common knowledge, or at least I don't want to take that chance. Therefore, the location as indicated in my retelling is not the correct one, so it's not really called Eagle Hill. I still like to speculate as to what might have happened if I had kept the appointment in the out-of-body state. Wonder what that was about. So this government official tells him what? That this was I asked him about the site without reference, and he related to me that it was a special federal research installation. So it was a government research building. It's not called Eagle Hill, though. That's the name that he put it in the book. So maybe he was supposed to go there out of body, or shit, I don't know. That's crazy. Not to mention the whole gateway thing. Like the whole gateway thing came after this too, didn't it? Well, didn't the gateway thing happen in the 80s?
Yeah. But I'm just, what if it was the government agency trying to recruit him?
That's what I'm saying.
That's why they wanted him to show. Yeah.
Because he said that it was specific. So there's probably like government, like astral people, like people, you know what I mean, out of body. I know it sounds crazy, but they came to him like 3 times and said his name specifically and told him to go there. And it took him to go through all the shit to find out that it was a secret research facility. You're probably right, dude.
Yeah.
There's something fishy about that.
Yeah.
All right, so another item. My company had received the franchise to install a cable television system in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we needed to receiving antenna site on top of a hill just outside of town. The owner of the hill was Roy, a small, balding, bright blue-eyed, energetic little man with a dry and subtle sense of humor. His face was wrinkled and tanned from many years of supervising the work in the 20,000 apple tree orchard atop the hill. As he was a true Scotsman, the negotiation was elaborately casual but came to a very reasonable and fair end, and we became friends. After lunch one Friday, he looked at me with a twinkle and asked, "Do you like to play cards?" An old familiar surge rose in me. "What kind of cards?" I said. "Well," he said, "some people don't call it poker because we play so many wild games, but you can have a lot of fun at it. It's only 10 and 20 cent games, so you can't expect to make any money. We hold it at a different fellow's house each Friday night, and the only thing is we don't have any drinking. It's the oldest continuous poker game in the city of Charlottesville. Must have been going on steady for 70 years, and that's a long time. If you'd like to come tonight, I'll pick you up wherever you are about 7:30. You'll have a good time at choir practice." I looked at him blankly. "Choir practice?" He smiled. "That's what we call it here in Virginia. Some fellows say that they are not sure whether it's legal or not, and we've heard of other games being raided for gambling, of course, so we aren't doing anything like that. So they're calling it choir practice." I smiled and said, "No, of course not. See you at 7:30 for choir practice." I became a regular member of choir practice. I did not attend every Friday, but I did show up at least 2 Fridays per month. And again, it was a welcome change from my daily work in cable television, and the participants were strictly local businessmen who had, for the most part, lived in the Charlottesville area all of their lives. They also were totally unaware of any strange research or other activities I might be involved in. Appreciate it, Ari. Thanks, brother. Even when the first book was published, they knew nothing about it, and I made no mention of it. To this day, perhaps 1 or 2 are remotely aware of what I do now. The first indicator that there was unusual factors involved in card-playing choir practice came about 2 years later when there was 6 of us playing a game of 7-card stud. The deal began normally, and my 2 hole cards were a 3 and 4 of clubs. Among the face-up cards dealt to me were a 5 and a 7 of clubs. It's almost got a, what is that, a straight flush? Among the face-up cards dealt to me were a 5 and 7 of clubs. So the betting was quite strong. There were pairs all over the table, including a pair of aces shown on Roy's face-up cards. After I stayed in the betting, which I had no statistical right to do, trying to buy an inside straight or a flush, the final 7th card was dealt to each of us face down. I did not look at mine, and suddenly, without any question, I knew that the card dealt to me was the 6 of clubs. It was very strange, simply a knowing. "Roy," I said, indicating the untouched down card, "that's a 6 of clubs, and that will make me a straight flush, and that will beat your aces full." Roy looked at the card and looked up at me with a sly grin. He had already looked at his last card, and he knew he had aces full. "I got 5 that says you don't have it. That's not the 6 of clubs." I reached for the pile of chips and said, "There it is, Roy." He smiled and matched the stack. "All right, show me." I turned it over, and it was the 6 of clubs. Roy smiled. "That doesn't beat my full house." He turned over his aces full, which beat the other hands on the table. "I have another 5 that says you don't have the 3 and 4 of clubs in the hole." I smiled. "Don't want to take your money, Roy." "A straight flush will beat my aces full." He pushed another stack out. "I don't think you got it. You somehow knew there was a 6 of clubs there, and you ought to quit while you're ahead." I smiled and said, "I don't want the other 5, Roy." And then I turned over the 3 and 4 in the hole, making the straight flush and clubs. He just looked at it and said, "Isn't that something?" On the very next hand, with Roy doing the dealing, the feeling I had was still there, very strong, this knowing. I didn't even look at my hole cards. Of the 4 cards dealt face up to me, there was a 5 and 7 of hearts. I knew, that's all I can tell you. I just knew. "Roy," I said, "you see that 5 and 7 of hearts?" Roy nodded. He didn't have the aces this time. "Well," I said, "this last card you're going to deal is a 6 of hearts, and that will make me a straight flush in hearts. You see, I haven't seen my bottom cards yet, you notice?" He nodded, watching. Roy had been the dealer, and the rest of the players were watching intently, expecting me to lose. Roy was an exceptional card player. The last card was dealt to me face down, and before I could pick it up, Roy said, "I got another 5, says it's not the 6 of hearts. No, as a matter of fact, I'll make 10. And he shot a pack of chips forward. "I don't want to take your money, Roy," I said, smiling. "You're not taking it from me, and I'm not giving it to you," he said. "So put it up." I did. "Now turn over the card," he demanded. So I did, and it was the 6 of hearts. He looked at me with utter astonishment. He was doing the dealing. No trickery was at all possible in his frame of reference. "Moreover," I said, "those 2 cards that I haven't looked at yet are the 3 and 4 of hearts." Roy looked at me. "I've got 20 that says that they aren't." With the utmost casualness, I said, "I don't want to take your money, Roy." And I turned over the 2 hole cards, and they were the 3 and the 4 of hearts. Roy looked at the straight flush, the same one as before, except in hearts. "Sometimes you're about the luckiest fellow I ever met," he said, and the others at the table agreed. But that particular run of, quote, luck was talked about for several months. The odds against 2 successive straight flushes of the same denomination held by the same person in a 6-handed card game are about 5,780,000 to 1. How did it happen? I don't know. And how did I know? Very simply. A sureness. I suspect a lot of high rollers have made a lot of money on such dealings and lost also because the knowing was not right. Damn, he should have called that chapter The Knowing. I think that's happened to me like once maybe in my life where I just knew something was going to like, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but I think I understand what he's talking about. But I don't know, man. I've never had that kind of knowing. Like the only time that I've ever had anything close to that is when I went to the casino in Tunica, and I just kept putting money on black because for some reason I knew that the damn roulette table was going to keep hitting black. I just knew it. And I turned like $100 into $3,000 because it just kept hitting black. But that's way different. The odds weren't exactly out of my favor, but I don't know. Maybe he's touched. I don't know. We'll probably figure it out when we come back. We'll get a little bit deeper into this. We got to take a short break. Ever happened to you, Bryce? You ever just knew you had cards like that? Honestly,
not cards, not cards, but certain circumstances.
Honestly, though, like you knew that, like you just knew it.
Yeah, just knew it. I just knew something. I called stuff. I've called stuff before.
Well, I'm not talking about confidence. The way he's talking about it is like, I just know it's there. Like there's no doubt about it. Right.
So I'd go to this jewelry store with my parents about once every 3 months so they get their rings clean. I'd always look for, I just think in the back of my head, maybe they got a Rolex, never had a Rolex. And one day I just went, they're going to have a Rolex today. They're going to have one. And we walked in there and this guy was trying to sell my dad a dang Rolex, dude.
You just, okay.
Yeah.
So the only time that's ever happened to me when I was little, I know exactly what you're talking about. Maybe that same thing has happened to him, but
yeah, maybe.
Because I was in the back of a car when I used to visit my mom when she was alive, and I was really young, so I'd go to North Carolina and visit her. And they had, those old station wagons they have, like back in the 70s, like Harry and the Henderson station wagons.
Yeah.
She had one of those. Her and my stepdad. Yeah.
Yeah, old Woody. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're all in the back. Me, my brother, my half brother, my two half sisters. And it's like 3 a.m. And I got my arms around all of them. And something just told me, like, we're going to get in a wreck. I swear on everything. I just knew it. Like, we're about to get in a wreck. And I held on to them. And sure enough, like 10 seconds later, just bam, we got in a wreck. A car hit us, pushed us off the road. It was really weird, too, because all of us kids, we just pretended to be asleep like nothing happened. I guess because it was weird or awkward. And then the people that hit us came running over. They looked into the car and they were like, oh, my God, they're dead. And I raised up. I was like, no, we're just asleep. But I remember that feeling like we're going to get in a wreck. Like, but I don't know if it was a knowing. It was almost like, it was not a knowing. I don't have a word for it, but it was pretty close to that. Anyways.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You're talking about the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But to know that you have the cards, well, what difference does it make, right? Like, no one's knowing.
Well, I mean, that's pretty crazy, though. Like, the amount of detail he went into on that, like, just knowing exactly what cards he was getting.
That is pretty nutty. All right, short break. I'm got to run to the lavatory, grab a drink. Be right back. Stay with us. More Lighting the Void coming up. More Far Journeys with Robert Monroe. Weird.
Naked in my salon, looking up at the stars and quietly listening to talk radio. I stop and take a moment to thank Isis for her grace and for giving me for all of the times that I've strayed off the path of righteousness, and for her generosity by creating Joe Roop so he can bring us his show, Lighting the Void, 9 p.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Blessings.
This portion of the show is being brought to you by dust. Yes, when choosing tiny motes of microscopic crud to collect under their beds, more people opt for dust than any other airborne irritant. Dust is great for aggravating allergies and for causing those delightful short circuits that so often ruin your home computers. Well, there's nothing better. So remember, dust is a must. From the makers of Dirt.
Sexy, sexy, made up of Brexit disaster. Pushing and pulling, conservative rolling, unlike plastic, easier to see through.
Well, I don't want to take your money, Roy.
Softer and sadder you sing. Sexy, sexy, do your thing. Learn to be shy and then you sting. Plexi.
All right, welcome back to Light in the Void. We are getting into Far Journeys with Robert Monroe. Keep in mind the new website isn't ltvpodcast.shop. I'm tired of domain shuffling, so we're just going to keep it right here at fringe.fm. That is the only website, and will be for the foreseeable future, the only website where you can get t-shirts, whatever. Like the only, every time I go on a podcast, people ask me, well, where can we find you? And I'm like, YouTube? But if they mean a website, it's fringe.fm. So just type in fringe.fm or www.fringe.fm, and we will continue to add things onto that website, as well as want to thank the patrons and all you guys for your support. You too, Ari. I actually finally got the YouTube money today. It's weird. It has to add up to so much, and then YouTube takes like 30%, and so they wait till they get to a certain amount before I can talk this. Like, I'm not going to get in trouble for saying this stuff before you can get it. So I got it today, and I could see it shows me all of you guys just like YouTube super chats and stuff like that, and it was really nice seeing that. So thank you guys. I really, really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Love hanging out with y'all. I wish I could, dude. Bryce, if we could figure out, forget the out-of-body experience, man. If we could figure out how Robert Monroe got that knowing thing, we could just go to Tunica and just clean up. That would just solve all kinds of problems, wouldn't it?
You would think, right?
It probably
Might
don't work
create more.
like that, though. It probably doesn't
That's
work when you need
more.
it. You know? Like, I'm going to go to Tunica and I will, though. I'm going to try. I'm not saying I'm throwing it away, but if I figure out this knowing that he's talking about, I promise you guys I'll share it with you. Scouts on.
They probably have their own agents.
Yeah, probably. They'll throw you out, too. I saw a guy get thrown out just for winning too much money at the racetrack in Hot Springs. No reason. Just, you're making too much money. You got to go, you know.
I'd rather have the money pants problem and just raid my closet every couple of days.
He said it was only like $3 or $4, though.
Yeah, but $3 or $4 a day is $3 or $4 a day, you know?
Yeah, dude, in today's age, it needs to be a 20 every time you go, at least a 20. Bro,
Yeah,
you can't you can barely get 2 cheeseburgers, fries, and a small drink for $10 nowadays, man.
Yeah. I spend at least $12 on lunch every day, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yep.
And so back to any, like Ari and whoever else, like you, April, all of you guys that have, Sudi, all of you guys that have donated or helped out, God bless you, you know. Because I wonder, some people are like, should I donate to my favorite podcast or eat today? Or maybe I didn't get gas. I mean, that's the world we live in today, right now, you know, for the most of us, a lot of us. All right, anyways, wasting time here. So Hemi Sync et al. With the publication of Journeys Out of the Body, we began to receive surprising inquiries, information, and cooperation from many unexpected sources. A book intended for the general public was attracting interest in scientific and academic circles. Our laboratory west of Charlottesville, Virginia, opened on an entirely voluntary basis. Originally named Westfield Research Laboratories, it was later changed to the Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences, which I still would love to visit. Have not been able to go yet, but it's in the bucket list. Using the name Monroe was not an ego factor, but simply the quickest way to clear the title officially. The, quote, applied sciences part was quite specific. We felt that an understanding of out-of-body experiences could be achieved on a level compatible with our Western sciences, and that the greatest service we could perform would be to apply any discoveries or information that we encountered. The laboratory consisted of a one-story building designed for the purpose and included 2 offices, a lounge, and a research wing. In the wing was an instrument or a control room, 3 isolation booths, and a briefing room. All 3 booths were connected independently to the control room for both physiological monitoring and the delivery of various types of audio and electromagnetic signals to stimulate a response from a volunteer subject in a booth. The booths themselves each contained a heated waterbed. Damn, that's easy to relax on. I love waterbeds. Thus providing a comfortable condition in total darkness. They were also environmentally controlled in air temperature and acoustics. A subject in the booth could be wired to transmit to the control room a wide array of physiological signals. This included 8-channeled EEG, brainwave, electrical patterns, the EMG or muscle tone, pulse rate, and body voltage. As things developed, we were able to determine most of what we wanted to know simply by reading body voltage changes. Aside from visiting participants from out of town, we had a local volunteer group consisting of several MDs, a physicist, that was Thomas Campbell right there, an electronic engineer, several psychiatric and social service workers, plus assorted friends and family. Most research and experiments took place at night or on the weekends, as all of us were employed in other occupations. In retrospect, the immense contribution that this group gave freely was a major factor in helping the whole process get started under the new conditions, and for this, I will be forever grateful. It took much patience and dedication to paste up with electrodes, then lie hour after hour in a darkened booth and report subjective results of various tests. Results could be correlated with instrument readouts in the control room to the point where a consensus could be achieved. Our first studies were a continuation of the sleep research begun in New York. The demand for a solution to a problem brought one of our early results of significance. Because so much of the reported out-of-body states, including many of my own, revolved around the sleep state, we still believe some answers would be found in this area. However, most of our subjects arrived at night after dinner, and with long, boring periods of being wired up with electrodes, they were either too tired to stay awake in the booth or too restless to be able to relax enough to report any subtle and subjective responses. Yeah, but this sounds like the life. Like, if I could just do this and make a living, which I don't even know how that would be possible, but just to go to a research laboratory and just practice getting out of body, that would be awesome. I would literally feel like, I've lived my ultimate life doing that. That's just me, though. Especially if everybody's getting out of body, right? Like, that's cool. It defeated our purpose to use any types of medication or drugs to control these states, so we looked for a method within our own frame of reference. The old truism held. Necessity is the mother. And it was through this need to help our subjects stay awake, get into a borderland sleep state, that we began to try to utilize sound. This resulted in the discovery of frequency following response, or FFR, which permit us to hold the subject in a certain state of consciousness between wakefulness and sleep for extended periods of time. By introducing certain sound patterns in the subject's ear, we determined that there was a similar electrical response in the brain waves of the subject. And by controlling that brainwave frequency, we were able to help the subject relax, keep him awake, or put him to sleep. One of our engineering participants suggested that we patent this usual or unusual process, and we received a patent on the method and technique in 1975. By cross-referencing the various effective frequencies among subjects, we also began to evolve combinations of sound frequencies that created FFRs highly conducive to OBEs and other unusual stages of consciousness. Among these, of course, was a very effective means of moving into what is commonly known as a meditative state. All of this did not come quickly. Only a few words cover hundreds of hours of putting together different sound patterns and testing for responses. With subjects patiently lying in a booth as sound warbled in their ears, slowly changing in pitch, while the technician in the control room looked for changes in the monitoring instruments. During such sessions, our volunteer subject participants learned to report verbally on any changes in their mental or physical condition. This became a very important ability to speak and perceive when the normal pattern would be to lose consciousness or be asleep. One of the first solid points of identification was a state that we began to label Focus 10. There was no particular significance to the number 10, and I'm not sure where it originated. Also, we wanted to be sure it was not confused with our other forms of consciousness. Therefore, it simply became 10, and we were able to identify this state very specifically and return to it again and again with our subjects. Easily defined, Focus 10 is a state where the mind is awake and the body is asleep. All the physiological responses are those of one in light or deep sleep. However, the brain patterns are different. The EEGs show a mix of waves ordinarily associated with sleep, light, and deep, and overlying beta signals or wakefulness. Gradually, there developed a very special group, a total of some 8 subjects completely familiar with the Focus 10 state. Verbal communication in Focus 10 through the microphone or headphone system became as normal as if we were sitting across from one another in a conference room. We could tell easily from the instrument readouts when they were and when they were not in Focus 10, and it could not be imagined or faked even if there had been any remote desire to do so. There were many times, of course, when they were unable to get into the Focus 10 state because of external pressures and stresses in their daily lives that they could not abandon easily. And in such cases, they simply reported they couldn't do it that night or canceled the appointment. And this saved much time and effort. With the constant stream of visitors, we began to determine that others, totally untrained, could be assisted into Focus 10 without a great deal of trouble. The process of learning to communicate verbally would take much longer. To see how far this would go, we sent a tape of the composite signal to a psychiatrist friend in Kansas. There's so many damn psychiatrists involved with this dude, man. How many freaking psych friends does he have? In an experiment, he tested it on 4 completely naive subjects and with no suggestion as to what to expect. He reported that one of the 4 subjects quit the test because he found that he was bouncing against the ceiling of the room, looking down at his physical body. That sounds like something Bryce would do. I quit, man. I'm bouncing. I can't take it. I'm just playing, Bryce. Every time I do this shit, I get out of body and I start bouncing up against the ceiling. I'm done. I quit.
That's definitely something that would happen to me. I'll tell you that.
Did it for real? You bouncing up against the ceiling?
No, but if it was going to happen to anybody, it'd be me.
Yeah, be just your luck, or he's just stuck at the freaking ceiling bouncing around. Our next step came as an interesting proposition. With the body asleep, or i.e. the physical senses turned off or reduced, why not develop frequencies that would enhance perceiving by means other than the 5 physical senses? With the insertion of high-frequency beta signals, our subjects began to find much more than the usual blackness. First came light and color patterns seen visually in the blacked-out booth with eyes either closed or open. Next came sounds heard in the head, not a part of the synthesized sounds, but voices, music sometimes, or loud explosions that startled the subject completely out of focused in, something that has still to be explained. Yeah, I think that's called exploding head syndrome. I get that shit sometimes. That's a real thing. I still have yet. I know we got to do a whole show on exploding head syndrome, but look that up. If I haven't been asleep for a while, or if I'm exhausted, or if I've stayed awake too long, you know how some people just nod off like they're on heroin or something. Like what'll happen to me is I'll start kind of nodding or getting tired, and then something will just I'll feel this pressure in my head like an explosion, like and it jars me open real quick. It does feel like something explodes in your head. It's crazy. Y'all look that up, exploding head syndrome. It's real. These phenomena were gradually perceived in a pattern as somewhat of a band preceding a change into the out-of-body experience. There was also preliminary physiological responses, lowering of blood pressure and pulse, slight temperature drops, about 0.3 degrees, loss of muscle tone. Subjectively, there were reports of a heaviness in the physical body, sometimes catalepsy, and a strange sense of heat followed by coolness. And as the induction of the OOB state was examined further, one key element did repeat consistently. Subjects began to locate within their non-physical perception a pinpoint of light. Don't go to the light, Carol Ann. When the subject learned to move in the direction of the light until it became larger and larger, and then move through it, the OOB state was achieved. In slow motion, it felt as if one were going through a tunnel to get to the light. A classic description that has been brought forth by many who performed out-of-body experiences inadvertently or in near-death situations. One new development was the key that opened many things for us. We now call it the hemisync process. Science has long known that your brain is divided into 2 halves, or hemispheres, but only in recent years has it been discovered that these 2 halves are entirely different in the functions they perform. And there is still controversy about the theory as to details of the hemispheres. And most of the time, we think only with our left brain. When we use our right brain, it's primarily to support the action of the left. Otherwise, we do our best to ignore it. In function, the nerve signals from these brain halves act in an X crossover. The left brain controls the right side of the body, and the right brain controls the left. We are primarily a right-handed civilization, dominated by our left brains. Only in the last 50 years have left-handers been accepted as equals, and in many ways, we still discriminate against left-handers. Did you know that a pair of scissors is a right-handed tool? Man, we don't discriminate. We just call them southpaws, and they're really good at sports and pitching and all that stuff. Boxing, too. We use the left brain to talk and read, to do mathematics, to reason deductively, to remember detail, to measure time, among many other facets, the source of logical, rational thought. It knows nothing else. Our right brain is the originator of ideas, spatial sense, intuition, music, emotion, and probably much more than we now realize. It is timeless, apparently with a language all its own. One of the best descriptions given to illustrate the difference is with a reel of movie film. To determine the content, the left brain will put it on a projector, show the movie on a screen, and thus be informed. The right brain will pick up the roll of film, hold it for a moment, then put it down and say, "Oh, I understand." Ridiculous. That's your left brain's reaction as you use it to read these words. It simply doesn't compute by left brain standards. Basically, we are a half-brain society. Virtually everything we consider valuable is operated or controlled by our dominant left brain. That's exactly what I mean back in the day when I was telling you that everybody likes formulas. They're all, everybody wants to be categorized or put in a box, or they need a formula to understand it, because we are generally a left brain society. Even if it originates in the right brain, such as an idea or music, the left brain takes over and puts it to use. How did we get this way? No one is absolutely sure, but one of the better guesses is that the left brain dominance came about because of a basic need to survive in a physical world. Through thousands of years, our forebears added to left brainism because that's what was the way to get things done. Our entire system, books, schools, colleges, and universities, industry, political structures, churches, are all fundamentally left-brained in learning, application, and operation. We have generally regarded right-brain thinking with amused tolerance, suspicion, disgust, irritation, or distrust and awe. Then why bother? Why not just stay half-brained and let it go at that? Who needs the right brain? We do. Recent studies show we use our right brain throughout our daily lives in many subtle ways. For example, the left brain remembers the name, but the right brain remembers the face. How many times have you spotted a familiar face but couldn't remember their name? Left brain, watch out. Studies of the world leaders throughout history indicate they thought with far more than their analytical intellectual minds. All great decisions by mankind have been made with the left brain plus the right brain, maybe? Evidence supports it based on what we know. Moreover, it's a good guess that the right brain pulls the voting booth lever in presidential elections. Current theory centers around the idea that we shift brain hemisphere dominance many times during our daily activities. Such a shift takes place instantly, depending on the mental or physical need at the moment. And this seems to limit even more rigidly the already minor use of our brain-mind potential. How we got smart enough, long enough to climb down out of the trees and survive as a species was either dumb luck or a miracle, or it was something else. So, how do we then go about using more of our brain power? There have been many ways attempted over the course of human evolution, and virtually all of them had drawbacks or limitations in one form or another. The hemisync process offers promise and potential in this area. It can be utilized with relative ease, does not require years of intensive training, and is not limited to a narrow band of application. Hemisync, short for hemispheric synchronization, uses patterns of sound to help create simultaneously an identical waveform in both brain hemispheres. This means that when your ears hear a certain type of sound signal, the brain tends to respond or resonate with similar electrical signals. Knowing that various electrical brain waves are indicators of states of consciousness, such as awake or asleep, you thus can listen to a similar sound pattern and it will help you be in the desired state of awareness. Hemisync takes the process an important step further. Each ear sends its dominant nerve signal to the opposite brain hemisphere following the X pattern. When separate sound pulses are sent to each ear, using headphones to isolate one ear from the other, the halves of the brain must act in unison to hear a third signal, which is the difference between the two signals in each ear. So, for example, if you hear a sound measuring 100 in one ear and another signal of 125 in the other, the signal your whole brain will generate will be 25, the difference between the two. It is never an actual sound, but it is an electrical signal that only can be created by both brain hemispheres acting and working together. The signal is so generated, it is narrow band in frequency and often twice the amplitude or strength of a typical EEG brainwave form. If the 25 signal above is one that produces a certain type of consciousness, then the whole brain, both hemispheres, is focused in an identical state of awareness at the same time. Most important, the condition can be changed at will by changing the sound pattern. It can also be learned and recreated from memory when need arrives. Once the researcher or clinician is exposed to some of the potentials of the hemisync process, his first thought is application with areas of his own interest. One illustration of this is the field of psychiatry. The use of hemisync in analysis apparently opens the patients to levels of memory that may take years to achieve using standard interview methods. Another experiment used has been in the reduction of stress tension in patients. Sometimes the change is so subtle that the patient himself is unaware of it. One of our psychiatric associates was treating an Air Force colonel for stress-related problems, and after 2 weeks working with HemiSync and the psychiatrist, he angrily wanted to give up. "It isn't doing a damn thing for me," he reported. "Everything's the same. I don't feel any different, not a thing." He hesitated. "Well, I did take my wife out for dinner the other night for the first time in 6 months, and oh yeah, I finally took my son out fishing for the weekend, which I'd promised to do for a long time, but that's all, nothing else, not a single thing." Our psychiatrist friend simply nodded. There's been much talk about the use of HemiSync with terminal cases. However, in spite of the broad interest and numerous requests, very few have actually utilized the system with specific patients. One example of this took place with another psychiatric associate who was treating what might be labeled the hardcore terminal case. His patient was a psychologist who had been ill for 2 years and had become drug addicted in order to handle the pain of his illness. Thus, the problems doubled up. The patient was supposed to know all the answers and would automatically resist all normal treatment with added drug dependency. Our psychiatrist began working with him daily, utilizing the HemiSync process, and by Wednesday of the second week, a simple but very significant event took place. The patient was able to go to sleep at night for the first time in 2 years without any pain or sleep medication. At the end of 2 weeks, the patient returned home. He died several months later, and the final report came from his wife. The psychologist patient had spent a very calm and quiet last week of his life, completely free of pain, without any medication, and had a pleasant and peaceful last few days with his family. Our psychiatrist who treated him believes that his exposure to HemiSync during treatment made this possible. Yeah, maybe. That's tough to say, though, honestly, if you think about it, because I've heard a lot of people do really good. Like, a lot of sick people do really, really well, maybe for a day or two, sometimes a week before they pass away. It's some kind of weird phenomena that happens. Another psychiatrist friend, active in research with schizophrenics, found that under certain HemiSync patterns, one patient lost many of the symptoms of his illness. When taken off the HemiSync sound, he reverted back to his typical psychotic condition. This was only one particular patient. However, it does beg for further investigation to determine if the patient could be trained to replicate the conditions created by HemiSync. Plus, some form of encoding or entertainment that would let him remember and use it in his daily life. Certainly one of the most successful applications of HemiSync is a training series we call Emergency Treatment. This is designed to help an individual through the process of serious illness, accident, injury, or surgery. One of the earliest examples comes to mind. A psychiatric counselor visited our lab, having heard of some of our work, and in the course of conversation, we discovered that he was at the time of the second oldest living kidney transplant recipient. He had undergone some 15 successive operations over the years to correct the effects of the chemicals that he had to take in order to avoid rejection of the transplanted kidney. He was due to go in for surgery for the 16th time on the following Thursday. We suggested that he try this emergency treatment series, and he readily agreed. Well, yeah, man, I would think after 15 damn kidneys you would try anything. His case was important in that because of the many previous operations, his doctor had a very precise history of his physiological states during surgery, how many anesthesias he required, what was needed to control the pain, and his rate of recuperation, among other items. But knowing this, his doctor agreed to let him use the tape series, which involved preliminary exercises and then listening to a HemiSync tape in the operating room during the actual operation, during recovery, and again while recuperating. On the scheduled Thursday, he went into surgery at 11 o'clock, and according to the report, the surgeon very nearly canceled the operation because of his low blood pressure. However, it was steady, so he decided that this was not a serious risk. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the patient called me from his hospital room. He was sitting up in bed. I just thought I'd let you know how it went. His voice sounded really strong. They gave me 1 shot of pain medication before I had a chance to stop them, but I have not needed any since. The only problem that I had was I tried to get up and go to the bathroom and I fainted, but the doctor reported that my blood pressure still was very low. Is that normal? Try counting yourself from 10 to 1, I replied, and then see where your blood pressure is. It would seem that the recovery tape didn't get you out of it completely. Call me back after your doctor takes your blood pressure again. He did as suggested and reported that his blood pressure had completely returned to normal. And according to the records, his recuperation time was cut in half from what it had been after all his previous operations. More important, he was able to control totally his problem of chronic pain, which had been plagued him in months of and years previously. Once out of the hospital, he began to develop actively the use of HemiSync for pain control, and he met with the state rehabilitation agency as one of their major problems in rehabilitation is the control of pain, which prevents many from living and working normally. The state's rehab people became interested enough so that we were invited to conduct a demonstration at the federal rehabilitation facility at Hot Springs, Arkansas. Hell yeah, it's right down the road from me. And as a result, we received a request for the cost to train personnel in our process at rehab centers in all 50 states. We provided this, but never received any further requests. Evidently, it was too unorthodox to fit into a federal budget. The use of emergency treatment during surgery had varying degrees of success and no failures whenever it had been properly used. One vascular surgeon had utilized it with over 30 patients and still has difficulty in enlisting his fellow practitioners in its use. The president of a major corporation used it during surgery and refused any post-operative pain or sleep medication. He evidently became so annoyed at hospital procedures that he discharged himself 3 days after surgery. A young woman had major abdominal surgery and was skydiving 1 week later. The emergency treatment series has had a remarkable history, and the biggest problem is gaining the consent of the surgeon and the hospital personnel to its use in their highly organized environment. For a good night's sleep, HemiSync appears as effective as prescription drugs. Executives on long airline flights use it to overcome jet lag. Others find it helpful in stress tension reduction or in playing a better game of golf. As a learning tool, it has a great ability to focus and hold attention. And in a particular course in a government training school, here we go with the government. In a particular course in a government training school, it increased mental motor skills by 75%. In another test, Morse code students improved their ability by as much as 30%. On the other end of the scale, primary grade pupils in Tacoma learned in 4 weeks what ordinarily took a full semester. These and other results led us to the beginnings of definitions of what we were doing and why we were doing it. It appeared to be something much different from finding ways to trigger out-of-body states. This brought us to the following formal premise. Stated simply, the Institute holds the concept that 1. Consciousness and the focusing thereof contain any and all solutions to the life process that man desires or encounters. 2. Greater understanding and appreciation of such consciousness can be achieved only through interdisciplinary approaches and coordination. I probably need to listen to some HemiSync myself. And 3, the results of related research efforts are meaningful only if reduced to practical application, or something of value, within the context of the contemporary culture or era. This led us to the base that consciousness is a form of energy at work. The first step must therefore be to perceive the energy itself, which is no small trick when you're using yourself to measure yourself, as it were. Once it is perceived in its raw form, one can possibly begin to understand how it's naturally used. Such perception will permit a broader and more deliberate control of such energy fields. From control, it is a very logical step to apply it in new and expanded forms. This is all a very circumlocutory way to say that if you can find out the stuff that makes you think and be, just consciousness, you can use it in ways that you are not using it now. Amen to that. I mean, I would say that Gareth is doing the same thing to heal himself. But I will say, I will say this. Any of you guys that have been through the Gateway experience or listened to the tapes, the original Gateway tapes, and if you haven't, hit me up. Go to the website, go to the Monroe Institute website and get the programs or whatever. You can definitely start to feel things change if you do it on a regular basis, for sure. And if you have anxiety, which I'm pretty familiar with anxiety myself, struggled with it my whole life, defeated it many times, and it still wants to come back sometimes. I think HemiSync is a good way to try to, control that. It's better than having a pop of Xanax or a freaking Valium or drink a glass of wine, even though that stuff helps too. But in the mid-'70s, a development took place that changed drastically much of our activities. Only in retrospect did it become discernible. Esalen at Big Sur in California invited us, we got about 15 minutes, invited us to conduct a weekend workshop using our new methods and techniques. And in a way, we took it to be somewhat of a recognition of what we were doing. Esalen was the then known as a beginning source for many new types of psychological theory and practice, and somewhat a fountainhead of intellectual approaches to the human mind. We accepted and made the trip, not quite sure what to expect when we got there. We had never handled 24 people at one time in the consciousness states familiar to us, and I am sure that the participants really didn't know what to expect either, except that it had to do with the out-of-body experience. We had planned a round-the-clock program with food available at all times and breaking up occasionally for 2 cycles of sleep. I and an engineer associate, Bill Yost, were the only ones there to conduct this marathon. And because we were dealing with this unknown subjects, we brought with us an affirmation for all of the participants to memorize before they started the session. And it goes like this: I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. Therefore, I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. Also, I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desire. The results of this first workshop were not spectacular, as far as we could determine, but we did learn much from it, and it certainly provided a much broader base for our experimental testing. Basically, we had introduced Focus 10 and various simple applications of the potentials of this particular state of consciousness. Our debriefing indicated that we had achieved this goal, and the participants learned what Focus 10 was: mind awake, body asleep, and learned how to produce it within themselves at will. We returned to Virginia well satisfied that the method was a practical one. Not long thereafter, we began to get requests from individuals and other organizations, including the government, to conduct more sessions. And after reviewing our results, we decided that this would be a very productive way to conduct experiments on such a broad scale that we could certainly not afford to do otherwise. Thus, we began to conduct weekend sessions on an occasional basis, and we grandly called it the M5000 program, on the premise that we would have a magnificent statistical base and a highly sophisticated and well-tuned training system. If we ran 5,000 participants through it, obviously, I mean, you would hope that after you ran 5,000 people through it, that it would be finely tuned, hopefully. But the information and experience gleaned from one program would be useful to modify each succeeding program in order to maximize these results. This involved also obtaining trainers to conduct these sessions, no easy task, and converting the system into headphones so that the hemisync effect could be fully utilized. After the first few sessions, we realized that it was folly to presume that we would never reach the 5,000 mark. We also began to recognize that we were creating for the participants a doorway or a window or a gap through which he could achieve other states of consciousness, and thus it became known as the Gateway Program. We did little or no promotion for the training series, and those who attended had heard about it by word of mouth from graduates. And because it was experimental, each participant signed a statement to that effect and was obliged to report results beyond the session itself. This is not to say that all did so, but enough did to give us significant statistics. Earlier programs were held over weekends at motels, conference centers, and special meeting facilities throughout the United States. And participants met in a large room where a distribution system we devised provided the tape training exercises via headphones. In retrospect, it was astounding that the program was effective at all, because often the meeting place directly adjoined the motel lounge and bar with a live orchestra playing at nighttime. So to get around this problem locally, we wired a small motel some 5 miles away from our laboratory where we had two-way communication to each room. That's pretty damn cool, actually. That's old school analog stuff right there. That's how you get it done. The major problem there was that the motel had no restaurant and all food had to be catered during the session. It was at this site that we tried an interesting experiment. We developed an exercise whereby the participants simultaneously would be able to move the special mental energy into a visible pattern of lights some 1,000 feet above the motel. In the latter stages of the session late one night, we put them through the test. The idea was that the combined energy of some 24 individuals might provide something we could see. All external lights in the motel were turned out. The motel itself was out in the country, and by stopwatch timing, we knew the exact moment when any light should appear above the motel. 4 of us went outside and looked up into the darkness. We had plenty of chances to accustom our eyes to the darkness beforehand, so when the signal came at the proper time, we'd look very eagerly. None of us saw anything. But suddenly, our electronics engineer yelled excitedly, "Look higher! Look higher!" And we did, and most of us had just been looking right above the roof of the motel. We now looked up far into the sky in astonishment, and against the starlight night there were soft, red, neon-like waves. They resembled nothing so much as trickling water moving across an arc of the sky directly atop the roof of the motel. That's pretty fucking cool. At exactly the time that exercise called for the light to shut off, it suddenly disappeared. 3 minutes later, the exercise was repeated on the tape, and the red waving rivulets appeared again and shut off at the appropriate signal. All 4 of us observed it and were tremendously excited by the result. Hell yeah, that's really rad. Later at a gateway session in California at a ranch north of San Francisco, we repeated the exercise. This time, we had an engineer with a special Polaroid camera pointed upward to attempt to take a picture if the phenomenon was repeated. To ensure against the possibility of fogged film, 2 photographs were taken just prior to the signal for the light energy to be generated. During the exercise, when the energy was supposed to be in place, 2 other pictures were taken. And after the signal was turned off by the tape, subsequent pictures were also taken. There were some 5 or 6 observers present. None of us saw any light phenomena. However, when we went in afterwards and conducted the debriefing, we examined the Polaroid photographs taken. The ones preceding the light signal were blank. The 2 after the exercise were blank. But the 2 taken during the exercise itself showed a round ball with a marbleized effect much like the Earth seen from a distance. Why the Polaroid picked up a picture and we could not has been explained by several physicists and photographers. The film can see, in quotations, light frequencies our eyes cannot. The usual explanations of light leaks, film fogging, etc. have also been put forward as the source of the round ball of energy. The blank film before and after made the 2 energy photographs more significant, being in the center of the film pack, a most unlikely place to be pre-exposed. So what does the Gateway program really do for an individual? Well, it varies so much that each seems to find his own answer, and many of course, have come on the possibility that they will have an out-of-body experience, and most of the time this expectation is not fulfilled during the session itself. Instead, they gain profound insights and understanding of the purposes behind their being and doing. Not all unusual or life-changing peak experiences are moments of revelation never before encountered in which neither cannot nor need be repeated. Yeah, remember, guys, if you listening to the show for a long time, when Whitley Strieber came on Lighting the Void, back in the day when he first went on Art Bell, he wrote that whole book, Communion, about the alien abduction experience he had. But he also, later in his life, went and visited the Monroe Institute, went through the Gateway program, and on our show, if you go back and listen to it, he changed. It's not like he totally changed his theory and said, well, I didn't get abducted by aliens. It's not like he said that, but he did say that more and more, especially after he went through the Gateway program, he realizes that it's very possible, and he thinks that it's probably what it is some form of conscious experience. I don't want to put words in his mouth, so you have to go back and listen to it, but it was pretty cool hearing him say that. But the program itself teaches the Focus 10 state, which is mind awake, body asleep. And participants also learn to move into what is called Focus 12, where all physical data input is shut off and the consciousness can reach out and begin to perceive in ways other than through the five senses. The action really begins here, where perspectives and overviews change drastically, and it is here where the participant truly understands that he is more than his physical body. The Gateway program thus has evolved into a unique process of self-exploration and discovery, and it first surmounts the fear barrier of the unknown of change, which seems to be the greatest cultural restraint on individual growth. Think of where you are now as a clearing in a dark forest. We call it C1 consciousness, and then we take you into the forest to a point where you can still, quote, see the familiar clearing. That point is a guidepost, or focus 10. And after a sufficient number of runs between guidepost and clearing, the fear disappears. At the focus 10 guidepost, you always know you can get back to the clearing if you get uncomfortable for any reason. And then from the focus 10 guidepost, another point is established deeper into the forest and probably out of sight of the clearing. This we call focus 12. And then after several runs between guideposts 10 and 12, this too becomes familiar and secondary fear fades away. You know that even if you can't perceive the clearing, C1 from focus 12, you can, quote, see focus 10, and from 10, you know the way back to C1. The process is explained or expanded to succeeding guideposts, each deeper and different beyond ever-expanding limits. And with the fear barrier dissolved, one of the greatest gifts to the human species comes into full play: curiosity. With the tools provided, the participant is then free to do as he wishes. He accepts the authority to do so and the responsibility. The individual of his own accord, without suggestion but through direct experience, begins to know, rather than believe, that he does survive physical death. It doesn't make any difference what he does during his physical life, what he believes. He will go on after his physical body dies. Survival beyond physical death is not a belief system, therefore, but a simple fact, as natural as being born. There is no dogma related to the Gateway program, except that when you begin the session, you should seriously consider that you are more than your physical body. It is inevitable that the borders between this and other reality energy systems are crossed, and many of the results are reported as reunions with, quote, dead friends and family, as well as encounters with other forms of intelligent energy not generally recognized or accepted by mainstream American cultural levels. Again, if you are aware of the basic effect of the hemisync process, that of providing an access to many levels of consciousness simultaneously, something far different from the usual consciousness that we use for the most part in our daily lives, you can begin to grasp some of the potential results. Through the Gateway program, we have been able to conduct tests with the hemisync process with over 3,000 subjects over the past 10 years. With a minimum of 20 individual test exercises per subject participant, that comes out to 60,000 plus individual tests of the effectiveness of the method and techniques involved. That has been and is the basic value to us of the Gateway program, a test base of 60,000. At the very least, we know that we have been able to put people to sleep 60,000 times and awaken them. That's a pretty good statistic for product testing, especially one that is non-invasive in its physiological impact. Most significant is the analysis of the Gateway population. Those who have attended the sessions over the past 8 years, first, 41% are male. This is double the norm for the typical self-awareness workshop. Yeah, most of those are usually female, like majority female. Most researchers agree this is due to the scientific aspect of the hemisync process as against more esoteric origins. Second, 29% are what we label professionals: psychologists, psychiatrists, educators, scientists, engineers, etc. These attend principally to determine possible applications in their own areas of interest. Third, the average age is 39, which puts Gateway completely out of the range of the fattest and intransient groups. Finally, 83% attend for one basic reason and come away with another: more valuable results. The best way that we can report the meaning of the Gateway is to give you some of the reports that we have received relative to the program from those who have attended. Here are a few of these. Before I get into these reports, let me look and see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Nah, we can do it. We can do it. I'm telling you guys, this book is way more interesting than the first. So just like the previous book, he gets into his theory and talks about what happened, and then he goes into his even deeper out-of-body experiences, which are fucking nuts. They nut here. All right, so here's the first report. It says 1,135 cm. I'm guessing that's the person's number. They didn't put the name down there, like 11 in Stranger Things. Shit, I don't know. They said the most thrilling experience for me was Focus 15 on increased vibrations. I felt the energy flow going slowly up one side and down the other side of my body, then faster and faster. I felt I would become a spiral, then a point, and so I did. And as a compact unit, I was flying higher and higher, but then I thought, I cannot go any further or any higher. And in a flash, I hear, hey, you limit yourself. Okay, then I overcome, accepted, and off I was. I felt projected like a Sputnik into the universe, to the stars, another entity integrated in the all. Feeling this oneness was an indescribable joy and happiness. The deep lesson I took from this exercise was that, although having heard and read many times that we are what we think, that we limit ourselves by our mind, there I was, experiencing something unique, at least for me, by overcoming doubts or limitations which I am solely responsible for. Patient 1644 CM. That morning, having lost interest in holding the solar system in my hands, can't believe I just said that. As the tape had directed me to do, I visualized the Focus 15, or blue door. Finding nothing there, I proceeded through red, yellow, pink, green, purple, and finally into white. Using white as level 21, I continued to 26, where I then, and have since, received messages for other people in the program. I later moved to 27, where I had previously found my father. Feeling that he was busy, I decided to try uncharted, to me, territory. Devising a digital counter, I sailed backward through darkness as the counter flashed numbers faster than I could read them. And somewhere near I perceived to be 100 or 98. I stopped and saw many people milling around. They looked like holograms, but conveyed the message of being alive. Some of them ignored me, but some moved away. But several approached me with great joy. I sensed that the latter felt that they were stranded and thought I was there to guide them back. I asked about the others and was told that some were just exploring and would return to their bodies when they felt like doing so, while others were waiting for their bodies to die so they could be free. The one speaking to me, though, said that they got there inadvertently and were not able to return on their own. At this point, Bob, I heard your barely audible voice saying, "You will now return to Focus 10. So in panic, I felt I needed your voice to find my way back. So I tried to piggyback someone, but wasn't able to do so, and returned to my check unit, and what I felt was the nick of time. With a great sigh of relief and an expletive or two, I re-examined the experience, and am doing so again at the moment of this writing. Well, one, I really don't believe it was a dream. As I type this 2 weeks after the event took place, I'm still overcome with a feeling of profoundness. And two, I don't believe in coincidence. Although the implications are not clear to me, I feel that there is a reason I experienced something I had never consciously thought about before. And three, here's a fact. There are people in various institutions who are catatonic or comatose and whom medical science has not been able to reanimate. Hence the people I ran to that couldn't go back to their bodies. That's pretty spooky. Patient 4659 CM. I am now considering what to me is the strong possibility that almost anything can be formed into 5 physical senses. Language, oriented thought is an illusion. Extra-physical feeling is as close as I can come to describing what is ultimate reality for me now. When I seek to perceive ultimate reality for me, what I think you are referring to when you use the word home, I experience blankness and bliss. Blankness not because it's blank, but because I attempt to experience it with mental processes that are geared to the 5 physical senses that are in the habit of perceiving illusions. I'm trying to use my biological illusion computer, that's a pretty cool thing, my biological illusion computer, to perceive beyond the apparent limits of illusion. That's like trying to smell a flower with your ear. I experience bliss because emotional feeling is the only perceptual tool that I'm able to use to sense beyond this illusion. If there are other perceptual tools that are available to me, they either atrophied by lack of use and must somehow be reactivated, or they must be initially activated. I get everything that patient just said, actually. Patient 2312, CF. During one rebel reball breathing exercise, I experienced what was the beginning of some rather puzzling happenings. For a reason known to me, I was suddenly in a black box, a void of total blackness. It's like being juggled from one extreme to the other, from total sensation to lack of sensation. Frustration began to invade me, for I found it was somewhat difficult finding a way out of this vast blackness. And in my next tape, I began to experience the blackness again. And that's when I started to worry. At our next meal, I mentioned that was occurring to our trainer, hoping she might offer a solution. During our discussion, my problem was overheard by a few males at the table who had apparently been listening in, and later one of the men took me aside to explain. He told me that a few of the men in our group had found themselves fantasizing about me during their own tape experiences, hence all the sexual thought vibrations I was picking up. He also told me that having a hard time dealing with their sexual attraction, they were putting me in their energy conversion box, a place to leave their problems behind, before embarking into their other states of consciousness. They had all helped put me in my black void so as to not distract them. Now, at first, I was annoyed at this. How dare they influence my experiences? How dare their sexual energy have that much control over me? I still marvel at how powerful thoughts are, and 3 men's directed at me was overwhelming. And at the same time, I felt somewhat naive for not having picked up the signs earlier. But I was much too wrapped up in how the workshop was changing me to fully get into what others were thinking. But this was not the end. I transformed my annoyance at being used as a sex object, even if only consciously projected, and started wondering what growth could be gained from this experience. It started me thinking along other lines, and what was to follow would change the course of my life. And it happened simply because I asked the divine forces in all sincerity for me to be able to experience spiritual love. Oh, how sweet. I asked not for me to be the recipient of it, but that I might learn how to give it to others to my fullest ability. And my request was granted. As I went into the next tape, I kept that thought in mind, and I wanted to feel what it would be like to feel a part of the love in the universe, to, in a sense, actually be making love to a part of me, a part of everyone. I left my own check unit at that point, non-physically. I had an out-of-body experience and felt an urge to visit my other gateway participants. I strayed into one room. I called softly to one of the people. He seemed taken aback to see me, and I told him not to be alarmed, that I was only there to send him love, and then left after blowing him a quick goodbye kiss. Later, this person recalled that he heard a soft voice in his ear calling his name. He said that he had felt a surge of love upon hearing it, but wasn't sure where it came from. Then, quite unexpectedly, I was suddenly drawn by a powerful force to one room in particular, to one check unit in particular, and it took me by total surprise. For the man in that unit was someone I didn't know very well. In fact, he was the only one at the workshop I had ever really had a chance to talk to. He was a young, good-looking psychologist, yet for some reason we seemed to be purposefully avoiding each other. All at once I had an all-knowing, as I seemed to float over him, that his vibrations were my vibrations, and I had an overwhelming desire to meld, to feel, to be a part of him, to become one. And it was truly one of the sharpest and clearest of my experiences. I gave to him both my body and soul until there was this tremendous energy surge that rocked and exploded in us. And it was an experience that is beyond words, for love, total and absolute, surrounding us more strongly than can be earthly experienced or imagined. The more I gave, the greater I received, and I didn't want to let go. I wanted to give him even more. It was like two energies in perfect unison becoming one at last. I could remember thinking how physical sex paled in comparison to this. Memories of past lives together came rushing in like flashes of light. We talked in this state, and I came to realize this experience could only have happened at the end of the workshop, as it did, for each of us would have been distracted had we met earlier on, perhaps hampering other growth experiences that week. There was a meeting of both our minds with this experience, and I knew our meeting had been more than coincidence. It was predestined. I truly experienced everything I asked for and more, and when I came down to the meeting room after the tape, there was an unusual heightened energy where people seemed to be flying. I saw him as I came down the stairs to join the group, and he looked at me excitingly, ecstatically, as if something totally incredible had happened to him. I hadn't said a word yet, and as he quietly repeated a number of times, "Thank you, thank you," I felt elated. I had made contact. We compared our individual experiences, making sure of us was not coloring the other's story or lying or bullshitting. And it didn't matter. Our stories fit like puzzle pieces, matching perfectly and interlocking. We both also had the use of all of our senses, the strongest being touch. After this experience, we were later reunited to share others together. We've been with each other for the past 2 years now, growing and loving together. So much did I learn at my gateway experience, but I was truly lucky to get it all. I not only got the icing, I got the whole cake. You know, I assume there's a girl, like, if you've done the gateway experience, you know what the energy conversion box is, right? Like, so there's a part in there when you're going through the hypnosis thing where Robert Monroe tells you to put all your worries, anything that's going to distract you or bother you or whatever, into this energy conversion box. So you kind of visualize this box and you put that shit in there, right? So what happened to this girl, I think, it's a girl, right? I didn't even check if it was a girl or a guy. I think it's a girl. So what happened to her, I think, is when 3 of these guys, she was probably like an attractive girl at the event or something. So 3 of these guys started thinking about her sexually and they couldn't move on into the program. So they put her in that energy conversion box as they were listening to the tape. And so that's why she probably had that experience, like she's trapped in a box in darkness, because they literally kind of put her in there. Pretty powerful, though. If that really happened, that's pretty damn trippy. All right, so Robert goes on to say, today the Gateway program is held for a full 7-day period at our facility in Virginia. The center is designed specifically to handle the Gateway program. No longer does one have to lie on the floor for taped exercises. Instead, the center now provides what are called check units, which stand for Controlled Holistic Environmental Chambers, which provide isolation much as we had in our original laboratory booths. Not only are the taped exercises conducted by headphones in the check unit, but the participant actually sleeps in these during the night, because it's much like a Pullman's berth on the old railroad trains. Some people initially feel they cannot sleep in their first night because of the sense of claustrophobia, perhaps, but with environmental treatment in the check unit, fresh air and temperature control, plus sleep sounds that are available, the main problem after the second night is to wake them up. They probably finally relax, right? So the isolated sleep has been so productive and restful. It helps achieve such a complete sleep that a number of participants have built check units in their own homes. And because the Gateway program is so difficult to produce and conduct properly, each year we question the value of continuing it. All things considering, it is certainly not a financial success, although supposedly we are the only research facility that charges for the privilege of being a volunteer. Each time we consider closing it down, we receive just coincidentally another report from a graduate who states how meaningful and how constructive have been the results of his attendance. So we continue and schedule another year of the Gateways. So next time we get into this, which won't be tomorrow night because Mary's going to be on, but after that, we'll get into Explorer Team 1. So the way this book's going to go, just so you know, so you can figure out like if you want to hang out or not. So after the prologue, he talks about HemiSync. He talks about the Gateway experience. That's what we just did. Then he gets into the Explorer Team 1, new associations, and then he segues into far reaches after that. So this is really when things start getting trippy and things start getting answered. His out-of-body experiences at this point become far more in-depth and I guess you could say more dynamic. But he does start getting answers to those big questions that he had in book 1. And I guess we'll see you guys tomorrow night. Bryce, did you pass out on me, buddy? That was a long chapter, wasn't it?
No,
Yeah.
I was just thinking about how I was going to practice being a beach ball tonight.
What the hell are you you're talking about bouncing off the ceiling?
Yeah, bounce off the ceiling.
Yeah. Man, I still want to go to the Monroe Institute. It would have been really cool to do it when Bob Monroe was alive, honestly. But I would still love to go there and do that program. It's a little expensive, but just to go and be a part with a group, like We should all figure it out and like try to raise money if we're like maybe 5 or 6 of us can go or something. That'd be fun. That'd be freaking awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Make an event out of it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm using the new software again, so I don't know how to do this. I guess we'll just play Sexy Plexi and get out of here. Love each and every one of you. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll be back tomorrow night with Mary Justina. Thanks for your listening. Thanks for your support. Night night. Sweet dreams, y'all.
Easier to see through, just like glass with no ring. Softer and sadder you sing. Sexy, sexy, do your thing. Learn to be shy and then you can sting. Plexi, plexi, pin don't shatter. Once you're broken, shape on that. You're wrecking your mind by killing the time that kills you. But you can't blame the time, cause it's only in your mind. Quickly go and then you'll know it's such an awkward show to see. And everyone you wanted to know, and everyone you wanted to meet, have all gone away. Oh, they've all gone away. And you're breaking your mind by killing the time that kills you. But you can't blame the time, cause it's only in your mind.